Okay, welcome to everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you right now. Thank you very much to all of you for connecting today to this CIBP Spark. Well, today we have Mathieu, who is CIO of CPH Bank in Belgium, who will make a presentation on PSD2, so the Payment System Directive 2. That's the directive we have in Europe, and I think this could be useful for all the members, but particularly for those in Latin America, since similar regulation is going to be implemented in the near future, and probably will be largely inspired in the European experience, in the European directive. So I think this could be a good heads up to get an overview of the main features of this directive and its implications. The idea is to make a presentation that it's not too long, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes max, followed by some questions. So I'll suggest that we do the presentation, and after we do the questions, but please don't hesitate to put forward any question or any comment that you may have, and then we'll ask Mathieu if he wants to reply to those. So let's start with the presentation. Thank you, Mathieu, for your availability, and the floor is yours.
Just for your information, I'm sitting in the same room as Kavi, so here is my hand. So
yes, we are sitting together.
We're all sitting together. So good afternoon. Is the sound okay for everybody? Is the sound okay? Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon, good morning for people on the other side of the ocean. First of all, I want to excuse myself for all the acronyms that are used. If there would be a Nobel Prize for acronyms, I think the first winner would be the European Union, because in Europe we use all kind of acronyms here: PSD2, TPP, GDPR, etc. So I hope that I will not use them, because it's now we use them like it's normal vocabulary. So I try to not use them too often. But if I use an acronym that you don't know, please note it, and then maybe at the end of the presentation I can explain the acronym. So PSD2, so Payment Service Directive 2. The vice president of the European Commission at the time said that this legislation would promote the development of innovative online and mobile payments. So we're talking about online and mobile payments, which will benefit the economy and growth of the whole European markets, and consumer would also be better protected when they make payments. So if we make it concrete, there are three principal aims in PSD2. The first of all aim is to provide higher security standards for electronic payments, in order to protect, on one hand, the payment itself, but also to protect consumers' financial data. Another aim is to have greater competition, so open the market to get lower fees for the customers, but also lower fees for the merchants, because, as you know, players like PayPal, but also Visa or card companies, the fees, especially for merchants, are very high, 3%, 4%, 5%. So this is also making the final price for the customer. This has also impacting the final price for the customer. So with PSD2, the European Union wants to lower those transaction fees. And then the third aim is to enhance consumer rights in numerous areas. So as you know, in Europe, protection of data, of personal data, is really a hot topic. And PSD2 is also, in that context, also a new, it's also named in PSD2 to hire the protection of consumer rights and its data and their data. PSD2 is also, we've seen and observed, was also the aim that PSD2 is a driver for innovation in the European payment system. And there are two axes. First of all is the authentication. So PSD2 is imposing a two-factor authentication for online payments. So two-factor, if there are, in general, there are three types of authentication. So the most traditional authentication is what you know, so username and password. An alternative is a possession, for instance, having an application installed on a mobile phone. And the third one is inherent, something you have, biometric signature with your fingerprint or facial recognition. And PSD2 imposes two-factor authentication, so two of these three authentication factors should be used. So either a username password with an application installed on the device, or device plus fingerprint, or fingerprint plus knowledge. So this is the first act of innovation. The second act, maybe. And the second act is opening of account interfaces. So it's the introduction of the concept of access to account. I will explain it in the next slide. So providing payment services to third parties, so that third parties which are not not part of the payment system have access to traditional services around payment accounts. So these are the two axes of innovation. The traditional, so in the pre-PSD2 area, traditional access to an account is, so we had customers. Customers are using the applications of each bank, and which this application they can access their account, or they can initiate a transfer. Now within the PSD2 area, we have still the customers, but the customers have two options. They can either use the online or the mobile apps of the banks, but they can also use third-party providers, and those third-party providers, they can connect to the banking backends, and they connect. In order to connect, they pass by what we called in Europe the dedicated interfaces, and those dedicated interfaces they provide three types of services. The first service, account information service. So a TPP can ask a bank, I have person X, of person X, give me the list of all his accounts, or for that account, give me information, or other people who have access to that account, or give me information or the history of all the transactions. So that's the first type of service. The second type of service is a payment initiation service. That there a TTP can say, okay, I have client X, and client X wants to do a transfer, and then that transfer is given to the bank, and then the bank should make the transfer happen. And then the third service, which is the least important one, is payment instrument issuer service. That is a service that allow to ask whether on a given account for a given person, whether that person has enough available, for instance, to pay 200 euros or something like that. So this is the least important service, but the first one, account information service and payment initiation service, are really very important services. Just to make it more concrete, so here I made a small illustration for the second type of service, so payment initiation. So we have a customer who is making online order or payment on the website of a merchant. That merchant, he offers a third party, let's call it TPPX, that the customer can pay with that application. So in order to make a transfer, that customer uses the application. there is a strong customer authentication with the two factors there, then to make sure it's really the client who is initiating the payment. And then the third-party provider is sending that information to the bank. So that, and therefore the dedicated interfaces are used. So it's standardized and secured interfaces. And then Bank A takes the payment, just like he takes a payment from his mobile application, and then he performs the transfer. Something which is not directly related to PSD2, but it's really linked to PSD2. Here in Europe, we also another project which is more or less the other leg of PSD2. There's another project called Instant Payments, and this project has the aim to make transfers between bank instant. So within, in Belgium, 5 seconds, but in Europe, in general, it's 10 seconds. Within 10 seconds, money from Bank A should be transferred to money B, to Bank B. So it means that if you perform a payment, for instance, I perform payment to Christelle, then Christelle, after 5 or 10 seconds, she can check her current account with her app, and then she will see that that money is transferred to her account of another bank. So this is not really in the scope of PSD2, but it's kind of the other leg of PSD2. So this is the service of payment initiation. In order to prepare PSD2, there were several impacts. First of all, on the level of the strategy. So mobile and online apps are not the exclusive interface to clients anymore. So the pre-PSD2 world, only access account information or transfers could only be initiated via mobile and online apps from the bank itself. Now, other applications between brackets can also initiate transfers or can have access to the data of the accounts. Also, competitors can use the interfaces. So what we observe for the moment in Belgium, I think also in other countries, that the first TPPs, third-party providers, are in fact the other banks. So other banks will allow or will the applications of other banks will allow to access accounts of our bank. So this is from a strategic point of view, it's a new given. So so it's possible that it will. We are for sure. It's already happening that clients are accessing our accounts using application of competitor. So this is from a strategic point of view. It's a new kind of thinking. From legal point of view, so the 3 services I explained, so these are critical services, but these are used by third parties. So we have no bilateral contract with those third parties. So those third parties are regulated by the national competent authorities, but we have no direct contract with those third parties. Another point from legal point of view is the strong customer authentication remains the responsibility of the bank. So either the third parties, either we don't have a bilateral contract with the third parties, all the transactions or instructions coming from those third parties, we as a bank are still responsible for that, for the authentication. So this is gives a lot of responsibility to the banks. And then also more from legal practical point of view, in order to get the let's say the license from national competent authorities, we had to perform, or we still perform, it's not finished yet. We had to provide an extended application form with a lot of proof, but also measures that we should take in place in order to get the approval by the regulator to continue our services. So it was also a heavy process from that side. Another concept, if you take a look at the process itself, there is a new concept of concept management. So TPPs, it's a new kind of channel, and that channel, a client can say, okay, for that TPP, okay, that TPP can have access to that account, that TPP third-party provider can have access to that account, that third-party provider can initiate payments. So this is really a new concept management, and this is also something we had to develop and it's something which is not existing in a pre-PSD2 world, because there we have our clients with our applications accessing our data. And in a PSD2 world, there we have all kind of applications, and then we have to make sure that that each application that the customer says, okay, that application can use it for this account and this account. So this is a whole new process. Impact on IT systems, that was also a huge impact. So we had to develop the new interfaces. So the 3 services, which is still ongoing because it's there are still some the regulator is still adding some requirements, and also infrastructure. So those service interfaces, they should respect the highest security standards and availability standards. So we should prove that the availability and the security of that interface is the same of our own mobile application. So we cannot put hurdles or lower quality of services for those interfaces, and we should report on that. So in order to make sure that we banks, we do not or we put higher standards or availability standards or on our mobile application and on the interface. No, it should be at least as high as for our own interfaces. In terms of data protection, so it's a given that a third party can access accounts of our clients. So they can ask the list of accessible accounts. So a TPP can say, okay, if a client is using TPP, that TPP can ask us to give the lists of all the accounts accessible of that client. The TPP can also ask the details of the accounts. So who are all the other people related to that account. The TPP can also ask the balance of an account and transaction information. So a history of, for instance, 3 months of all the transactions. But the client's consent is crucial. So each time a TPP is asking for that data, we should be sure as a bank, so it's the responsibility of the bank, that it's really the client who is asking it. So there is also always an explicit consent needed, and that in terms of if it's just accessing the data, that consent should be reviewed regularly, so during 90 days. So it's not that if a TPP gets it for once, then it's not a consent forever. So there is a regular review of that consent. That consent should always be confirmed by a strong customer, so 2-factor authentication, and then it's always in the spirit of the general data protection. So the TPP, so if the TPP get the consent, then the TPP should respect the general data protection regulation. I was asked to give a little bit also to tackle the point on data protection regulation. So, but it's not the scope, the major scope of this presentation. So instead of going into details of GDPR, so general data protection regulation, I just listed here some examples of fines that companies get when they did not respect that regulation. It's maybe important to say that GDPR applies to natural persons, so it's protecting the data of natural persons, and it aims the targeted not all of them, but the targeted companies are in particular, and you see it on the amount of the fines. The biggest fine for the moment is on Google. So the European Union had some problems with the very important position of the fintechs, and that fintechs that they use, but it's not only fintechs, but they use very small letters, and then you accept it. You accept to say, okay, and you can share my data, and then they use it to pump you with advertising, or send your information to other companies. So GDPR is really protecting the data of natural persons, and then if companies do not respect those rules, then you will get fines. And you see here There are already examples that companies get those fines. So GDPR and PSD2 are related. So the principles of GDPR are also integrated in PSD2. So a client gives his consent. Then if the TPP gets his consent, we can provide the information. But then the TPP, if the TPP receives information, then the TPP should respect general data protection regulations. So if the client says, okay, you can access my account information because with your tool, I just want to have a view on my portfolio. But if the TPP is also using that information to send advertising or to send it to another company, that's not allowed under GDPR. In terms of payment service providers, so at the moment we see that large players, especially non-European Union players, have strategic positions in payment industry, like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, PayPal, Google Pay, Apple Pay, and PSD2 is a kind of I say can because in reality we don't see it yet, can be an alternative to those traditional payments service providers. So on the left hand, you see the traditional payment scheme with an acquire and a card scheme. So a customer who wants to do an online payment, he passes by an acquirer like worldwide. I think it's WorldPay with the biggest one in Europe. I think e-commerce is also important with an acquirer. Then that acquirer is connecting with the card scheme, and then the card scheme is connecting to the bank. So here it's a flow with two intermediaries. Within PSD2, there are no intermediaries. There is a third party who can connect immediately to the bank, and then the bank is transferring the money to the other bank. So it's from a closed traditional scheme. We always say you have an acquirer, you have a card scheme, and a bank. We have it open, so we can have a list of third-party providers who directly access to the bank, and then the bank is making via an existing framework, existing network of credit transfers, the payments. So some intermediaries, we don't need any more intermediaries. So now, for the moment, we see that that Visa and Mastercard they are doing some. They try to keep their market share, but now the question is, they could also present themselves as a TPP, but then it means that all the investment that they did in their traditional scheme, that they will lose all that. So for the moment, it's difficult to. The impact is there. We still have to wait and to see how they will position, but it's something that can shake the position of traditional players. And that was also, as you remember, the goal. One of the aims was to open the payments system in order to reduce the fees. So yeah, I think there will be an impact, but how important and the impact will be, that's difficult to assess for the moment, and I'm not an insider. Thank you for your attention. I hope that it was not too annoying, and and please feel free to fire your questions if there are questions, and I will try to respond. I'm not a PSD2 specialist, but I will do my best. So if there are questions, please ask them.
Thank you, Mathieu, for summarizing such a complex piece of legislation into very schematic way. I think it was very well explained. Something that it's I believe very complex. And also to mention that this is a reality for us because it started, as I understand,
September,
as mid-September, so like a month ago. And I would like to invite now some of the members, or to all of you that would like to have, if you have any question or any comment, or you like to share your views about this presentation, please feel free. Maybe from Argentina, or maybe from Brazil, or from Cabal, Brazil, from Chile. I see Carlos also is connected there. Please be aware that you are on mute, so if you want to say something, you have to unmute yourself, and then we'll be able to hear you. No questions? What is it? Has it changed any? Who is that? Marisol. This is from Argentina. Has it changed anything, the relation of the cards, the credit cards with the banks? The relation that there was. You explained that before. Is there any change, or what would be the impact of the credit card in relation with the bank? I think that's what she.
Yeah, you are on mute. I'm looking there. So the question is there an impact between the relation with us and, for instance, Visa and MasterCard?
Yeah.
I think now we don't see any difference, but we feel that they do their best to keep the market share, and we feel that there will be alternatives. And instead of using a card, people will use their smartphone, and they just initiate a payment, and they send it via the dedicated interfaces, and then the bank will do the payment. So for the moment, it's early to see whether there will be a market shift, but I think there will be. Here in Belgium, we have initiatives, local initiatives. We also see it in the Scandinavian countries, that there are really apps who are offering the same services as cards, but it's difficult. There is no immediate impact, but I think on the medium term there will be an impact. So I think they will lose some market share. I think cards will always exist. A world without cards, especially without credit cards, will there will always be people who want to have credit cards. But for small transactions, if you want to go quick and also at a low rate, because if a payment with a credit card is, there is always a fee for the merchant. So for small payments, that can be also for online. If they're an online sector, the margins are low. So if a part of the margin, you have to see the part of your margin to, for instance, Visa or PayPal. If you have 5% margin, you already have to see 3% to PayPal, you only get 2%. So if there is an alternative which is at a much lower cost, so I think that card companies will lose market share. They will not disappear, but there will be, I think, a new equilibrium. But it's for the moment too early to really see this happen. But for the moment, we don't really, in a relationship with card providers, we don't see yet any difference.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. Is there any other questions? You can also make your questions via the chat box that you have in the program. So feel free to either raise your voice or send a text message, either in English, in Spanish, in French. I think we are enough here around the table to make a Dutch, if there is any Dutch.
No Chinese.
So please feel free if there is any comment. Jerome?
So I maybe had a question. I think you touched on that, but I was wondering, who is verifying the legitimacy of the third-party providers? Whose responsibility is that to know that there is not a crook application, Russian mafia or something like that, developing a system?
So there are also national competent authorities. So each regulator of each country will give the licenses to
Bank regulator.
the banking regulator will give the license to third-party providers. So for instance, if you are a Greek application, you should ask the Greek regulator to get your license, but with that license you can access, in theory, all the European banks. But that's in theory, because in practice there are some countries who are still saying, okay, we only at the first phase we're only accepting third parties from our country. I think in Germany, I don't know whether there are German colleagues,
yeah.
but I've heard that in Germany, the German regulators say, okay, we only accept third parties that are approved by Germany. So it means that each third party should have an approval by each country. But normally it's the country, so the supervisor of the banking supervisor of each country should give the license to that TPP.
Okay. We also have here a couple of questions in the chat box. The first one from Eduardo. Saba, how banks are evaluating TPPs that can consume their APIs? I guess it's similar to what you mentioned. No?
How there is no evaluation.
How you can verify?
No. You have to provide the same level of services that you do for your own app. So that's the regulator will check that if a third-party provider come and knock at your door, he has the same service quality of service that if it were your own mobile app.
Here there was a salutation from Carlos. I don't know if this is following any question, but in the meantime, I have a question. You mentioned that the customer has to give consent to the TPP to access to his account data, right? And then you also talked about the GDPR, that the use of this data has to be according to GDPR, GDPR. So basically, TTP cannot provide this data to third parties, to other parties. But then I was wondering to what extent this company, this TTP, can use this data themselves, because maybe they obtain this data to sell you something, but it's a huge company, and then they can also use it to spam you with many other products of the same company without selling this data.
But in reality, you can. In fact, there are two levels of consent. The first consent is that if a client of us is using a TPP and that TPP is knocking to our door, then we should have the consent of the client in order to give that information to the TPP. So that's within PSD2. But then the TPP should use that information with respect to GDPR. And so if the TPP is saying to the client, I use the information in order to visualize your portfolio, but in reality they send it to Google, that's not in line with GDPR. So the consent, in terms of it's a consent towards the bank to transfer that information to the TPP, but then the TPP should respect GDPR, and so that's the rules, general data protection rules. That TPP should say, okay, make explicit to the client, okay, I use your information for that service, and that service, and there is no explicit consent on that level from the client. The TPP is not in line with the GDPR regulation, but it's kind of the mindset. The mindset is that if a client wants that the TPP has access to the information, we as bank cannot anymore block that. So if a client is okay to get that information, then we should do it. But the consent is done via a strong customer authentication. So in order to protect, to make sure that not everybody can say, okay, I'm client X, can you give me that information? But PSD2 is not saying it's GDPR that is imposing the framework on DPP, the use of that data, but PSD2 is also in the spirit of GDPR, but on a different level.
So Carlos is asking, we would like to know which are the PISP,
payment initiation service providers and account information service providers currently operating in Europe or in some European countries. But for the moment, what we see in Belgium, Belgium is not, I don't know whether Belgium is representative for the whole European Union, but we see that the most payment initiator and account information service providers are other banks. So other banks are integrating that services within their mobile application in order to make sure that people who are using their application they can access our accounts. So really new players in Belgium for the moment we don't really see new players. There are some players who are developing. There's a local player like One Contact Payconic, and there is also in Scandinavia. I don't have the right name. There are some local initiatives, but for the moment, PSD was launched in September, and I think Alain agree. For the moment, is it science before the storm, or was it a big cannon to kill only a small a fly? We don't know, but.
And Carlos has a second question. Do you have APIs running right now? If so, were they developed by yourself or were they bought to other companies?
Well, in reality, what we have two layers of APIs, and the first layer is we bought the first layer. So because in our interface, first of all, we should verify if we get a call from a TPP, to verify what is a TPP and if the TPP really has this license. So that part is developed and is also hosted outside our services. The other part, so really the business rules, and then in order to get all the information, etc., that's developed in-house, but with an external, also with the help of external firm. So it's a mix, but I have the impression that here in Belgium it's 50-50. Half of the banks bought an on-the-shelf solution, and the other half did something on their own. But there is something very important that's the delay. So we're talking here in seconds. So if you pass by an external provider or buy something which is very complicated, it should go very fast. So timing and availability is very important. So it's that's something which make it sometimes difficult to pass by an external party or by an external framework. The timing constraints are really very important.
Do you think the GAFA would be playing a role and play maybe a role of a TPP, like the Google, Amazon, because obviously if they get access to transaction information, you know, a company like Amazon, like Xavier was saying, they don't have to send the information outside. Within Amazon, they can offer many services if they realize that you order books from another, you know, bookstore like Chapter in the US or Fnac in France.
But for the moment, like you said, for the moment, I have the impression that the Amazons and all the, especially the American companies, they think, okay, PSD2, it won't.
It's Europe.
It's Europe, so we won't invest in it, and so they're really, for instance, Apple Pay.
They want a worldwide solution.
Yeah, they want a worldwide solution, and they want, and for instance, Apple Pay in Europe, Apple Pay is always linked to credit card or a schema of Maestro, so of Mastercard, always linked to the existing schema. So the open mindset of Europe I had the impression that the traditional players, they want to keep it close with bilateral contracts so that they have really control of everything. They can ask the fees they want. So I had the impression that for the moment they don't seize the opportunity. So they are afraid that they feel attacked, and maybe that's. I think between the lines, it's also a little bit the reasoning behind the European Union. The most monopolist players are owned by companies outside Europe. So PSD2 is also a little bit there in order to try to lower a little bit the power of those big international players. But for the moment, I have not. For Amazon, I don't have the impression that Amazon will have its own TPP and will pass by delegate interfaces.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. I think we're already exceeding the time that we plan. It's now 45 minutes. Perhaps let's make a last round of. If there is any last question from members, please let us know either in the chat box or via voice. Otherwise, I think we could stop it here.
If you still have some questions, you can always send them to Xavi, and then I will try to reply.
Okay, I think it's a good idea. If there is any further question, Mathieu is available to help you out, and I would say that we kind of leave it here. Thank you very much to all of you for joining today in this to this part. I hope you found it useful. I think it was very interesting, and particularly thank you to Mathieu for his availability and for breaking down this complex piece of legislation. So thank you very much again to all of you, and I hope to see you in the next Spark in a few weeks. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon or nice evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.